If you look at it from the North Korean perspective, they have always believed that nuclear weapons would be the key to peace and stability in this region by preventing the United States from, in their view, bullying them. They feel if they can prove they have an effective nuclear deterrent, then perhaps the U.S. will try to talk instead of trying to impose sanctions and making military threats. But the real fear and the growing fear is that if North Korea actually goes through with this kind of a nuclear test, which does seem increasingly likely, the results and the response from the United States, unknown. Flying into the North Korean capital, life on the surface seems normal. Beneath the surface, it's anything but. Overseas North Korean workers are being sent home in droves, their jobs eliminated by UN sanctions. The U.S. calls it punishment for an illegal, dangerous nuclear program. North Korea calls it evil, an economic blockade. On my 16th trip to Pyongyang, I still see signs of growth. Plenty of traffic, construction, a steady flow of electricity, keeping the growing skyline bright. But the prospects of a peaceful resolution to the nuclear standoff with the U.S. seem to be growing darker by the day. At North Korea's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, thank you so much. We asked to meet with a senior diplomat. Lee Yong-pil agrees to talk, but the mood is tense. His anger at the U.S. palpable.
Donald Trump said he would totally destroy North Korea, a sovereign state.
He's referring to the U.S. president's fiery speech at the UN last month when he personally insulted a fellow head of state.
Rocket Man is on a suicide mission for himself and for his regime.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un fired back, calling President Trump's behavior mentally deranged. North Korea's foreign minister made a threat that alarmed even longtime Korea watchers.
This could probably mean the strongest hydrogen bomb test over the Pacific Ocean.
Some analysts have accused North Korea of bluster, saying they haven't yet achieved full nuclear capability. And if they go to war, they risk total destruction. But the North Koreans warn the U.S. not to underestimate their resolve and their growing arsenal. Should the world prepare for North Korea to detonate a nuclear device above ground?
The foreign minister is very well aware of the intentions of our supreme leader, so I think you should take his words literally.
U.S. and North Korean officials tell CNN diplomacy has broken down, pushing two nuclear powers dangerously close to military conflict.
The U.S. is talking about a military option and even practicing military moves. They're pressuring us on all fronts with sanctions. If you think this will lead to diplomacy, you're deeply mistaken.
So then I ask, what needs to happen for diplomacy to resume?
The U.S. needs to understand our new strategic power and fundamentally eliminate its hostile policy towards the DPRK.
He says North Korea's leader is following through on a pledge to reach a nuclear balance of power with the U.S., which they say will lead to peace and stability. Even as many around the world worry, the end result could be the exact opposite. If North Korea were to go through with this atmospheric thermonuclear test, it would be the first the world has seen in nearly 4 decades, since China did it back in 1980. But again, North Korean officials here reiterated this would only be a test to improve their technical knowledge, to send a message that they have this nuclear deterrent. They would not consider this an act of war. Again, in their view, nuclear weapons will guarantee peace, a view counterintuitive to much of the rest of the world who really worry what is going to happen. And then, of course, Michael and Emmer, the big question here, timing, with President Trump's visit to Asia happening in less than 2 weeks.
President Trump is in Asia. Big trip there. It is Japan and South Korea and China, Vietnam. U.S. Navy now positioning 3 aircraft carrier strike groups in the Western Pacific ahead of this trip. The USS Nimitz is joining the USS Roosevelt and Reagan already in the region. What does this mean? Fox News military analyst General Jack Keane. Let's get to this first, sir. Then we'll transition here to what we're learning about Niger and Western Africa. 3 carrier groups now. What do you read into that as a military man?
Well, first of all, 2 carrier groups is unusual. 3 is very, very unusual. And it certainly is, even with a presidential visit, we don't normally do something like that. But I think it doesn't mean that we're going to go to war. What it does mean is it's part, I think, in my judgment, just thinking about it, is it's part of the overall strategy dealing with North Korea. The president's strategy with his national security team is to isolate North Korea and apply maximum pressure. And to do that, they said, we're putting the military option back on the table, and then their main effort is to use diplomacy to cut off all trade with North Korea, with countries, 20-plus countries, and that's happening. They use China as a lever against North Korea, and that is happening. And also to keep convincing them that the military option is not rhetoric as it was during the Obama administration, that it is absolutely a real, serious option that the United States will pursue.
Yeah.
So I look at it as part of the deterrence that the military option is credible, etc. It doesn't mean that in the next 2 or 3 weeks we're going to start some kind of military action against North Korea.
As you know, Mattis is running the show on so many of these matters here now, and this is quite a message.
During his first official visit to Asia, President Trump plans to advocate for increased international support to pressure the Kim Jong-un regime to give up its nuclear weapons. Preventing North Korea from developing a nuclear-armed missile that could reach the U.S. mainland has become a top national security priority for Trump.
He's raised all kinds of expectations about what he is going to do about North Korea. And if he doesn't do those things, then it seriously threatens his identity, it undermines him, it undercuts him.
The Trump administration has worked with China and Russia in the United Nations to pass tougher economic sanctions that could reduce North Korean trade by 90% and oil imports by 30%, and also imposed unilateral restrictions as well. However, U.S. military allies Japan and South Korea have been split over Trump's emphasis on the possible use of military force and his threatening fire and fury rhetoric to totally destroy North Korea if provoked. In Japan, Trump will meet and likely golf with Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, perhaps his closest friend in Asia.
President Trump and Prime Minister Abe also agree on a number of issues, including, in particular, on the North Korea problem to a very large extent.
Japanese public support for Abe's strong stance on national security was bolstered after North Korea conducted 2 missile tests that flew over Japanese airspace and helped his conservative coalition recently win a decisive victory in an early parliamentary election. Yet while Abe has voiced staunch support for Trump's maximum pressure policy, officials in Seoul have quietly indicated that the threat of force is a diplomatic tactic to force concessions from North Korea and China. South Korean President Moon Jae-in is also expected to emphasize his country's long-standing ironclad U.S. alliance when he meets with Trump in Seoul. However, the liberal South Korean leader has openly opposed any use of force on the Korean peninsula that could engulf the region in a devastating war.
I think Trump's visit is an opportunity to educate him in terms of how South Koreans see this, and the fact that South Korea's been living under a credible threat of North Korean nuclear attack for a while now, and we're all doing fine.
Trump has characterized Moon's past efforts to engage North Korea in dialogue as unworkable appeasement. For now, differences between Seoul and Washington have been muted in the face of North Korea's continued missile and nuclear tests and Pyongyang's refusal to engage in inter-Korean talks or even accept offers of humanitarian aid from the South. Brian Padden, VOA News, Seoul.